Our first speaker is the Asia Regional Director of Oxfam International. She's an activist and development worker with over 30 years of experience working with civil society coalitions, environmental movements, and international women's rights organizations. Since 1999, she's been with Oxfam, starting as a project officer working directly with women and men supported by Oxfam before gradually progressing to senior leadership. Today, she leads Oxfam in Asia. Meanwhile, Oxfam is a global movement of people working together to end the injustice of poverty. It tackles the inequality that keeps people poor and helps people build better lives for themselves and for others. Oxfam addresses issues like land rights, climate change, and discrimination against women. Its penultimate goal is for every person on the planet to enjoy a life free from poverty. It works in 65 countries around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Lan Mercado.
I just want to thank Prout and my good friend Arnel for inviting me to be part of this symposium. And I'd like to greet everyone, those in the Philippines, a good evening, and those in other time zones, either a good morning or a good afternoon, whatever applies to where you are located. Before proceeding, I know that I was introduced as Oxfam's Asia Regional Director, but I also want to clarify that I'm coming to this symposium not so much as a representative of Oxfam, but as a Filipino citizen. I actually returned to the Philippines in 2016 to make sure that I am able to contribute to the efforts of civil society in the Philippines. So maybe it's also appropriate that I introduce myself as someone who is involved with the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism. I'm on the board. I'm also a founding member of Baigani, an organization set up by feminists to address the effects of the extrajudicial killings, particularly on widows and orphans. I'm also on the board of the Citizens for Promoting Human Rights and a founding convener of Every Woman. And perhaps it's more as a Filipino citizen that I would like to address the question of ideal leadership and good governance. And of course, I want to begin with the context of the country. Obviously, the pandemic marks the current context for us, but the pandemic is true, not just for the Philippines, but for many countries across the world. But the pandemic is not the only disaster that we're facing. We're also facing climate-induced disasters as a result of the way human beings have abused nature and the planet. On top of that, we obviously are in a state of social and economic decline, whether that's health, education, increased levels of poverty and inequality. There's also ethical, moral, and cultural decline. I mean, it's quite obvious how many people condone violence and human rights violation, saying that, it's not my issue, I'm not affected, or even worse, that those who are abused or killed deserve it, deserve the violence. There's also acceptance of misogyny, meaning hatred and denunciation of women, especially those who dare to oppose or to be different. And there's a culture of corruption. That's almost a given. It's just a question of varying degrees on, what can we accept and not accept. If you look at all of this, there is a political decline. The standard of competence and character of political leaders have declined. And in summary, the country is in a downward spiral. So what to do? Clearly, we have to arrest and reverse the spiral. And what's necessary, among many other things, is obviously good public governance. There are, of course, many different kinds of governance, but let me focus on public governance. There are some basic attributes of good governance. No? We all know that it has to be transparent, inclusive, participatory, efficient, and effective. But governance is not just about governments. governance is also about active citizenship. In fact, good governance does not happen in a vacuum. Unless there is a citizenry that actively demands for it and makes governance accountable, good governance will not happen. Even with citizens actively demanding and fighting for good governance, if government institutions are politically captured by elites and vested interests, which typically is the interweaving of economic and political interests, it's hard to make it happen. So good governance is a strategic and long-term goal that rests on choices, decisions, and actions that we take now. So what's the now? What's the short-term view? So let me go back to the context of multiple simultaneous crises. And good public governance is critical more than ever in a situation of crisis. There are many things that good governance is expected to do in a situation of crisis, beginning with enhancing public trust, risk governance and crisis management, the coherence of policy, the coordination of different parts of government, regulation, including public sector innovation, upholding public integrity, budgeting, public management, and the business continuity of governance itself, but also ensuring that in the exercise of governance that we include a respect for diversity and inclusion, and that policies are made and evaluated on the basis of evidence, and that public communication is dependent on accurate, reliable information. So the leadership style that is required in a situation like what we have now is one of adaptive leadership. The objective of which, of course, is to address complex problems and resolve this through systemic approaches. But difficult problems are best solved with inputs from the whole spectrum of government, not just a select few. So that's the short view. But what is the immediate view related to this critical juncture that's marked by crisis? Of course, no other than the elections. But the current crisis also provides an opportunity to learn about the kind of government we need to arrest and reverse the spiral, an opportunity to educate others, an opportunity to focus on what we hold and value in common, to clarify our differences and how to respect, navigate, and balance this, not to reject or repress, an opportunity to rebuild and rise as a citizenry to install a government we need and deserve. This opportunity will come at a cost. It will cost us. It will demand something from us, that we educate ourselves on issues as well as the political personalities or leaders, so-called influencers, and discern between good and bad influence. That we speak up, not necessarily in public, not all of us are public speakers, but certainly in private, to friends, to family, colleagues, business associates. It will demand that we be courageous, especially in this time of deep divides and enmities, even among relatives and friends, especially in social circles, fanned by deliberate disinformation and the promotion of hatred on social media. And finally, that we show up on election day and be vigilant about the sanctity of the ballot. So I'll stop there because I know there are other speakers and I look forward to an engaging discussion. Thank you.